Overwhelmed?
I mean, I didn't think we were going to invite that many.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people said they couldn't come because it's summertime and they have other plans.
Yeah. That's my middle son was born. Yeah.
On the top. Set. Whenever you're ready.
Oh, so we're all set?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Today is July 28th, 1992, and I'm Beth Cohen, interviewing Ellen Zitkin in Providence, Rhode Island. Ellen, why don't we start by your telling me where and when you were born, and whatever you can about your earliest childhood memories.
I was born in July 8, 1933 in Kaunas, Lithuania, to a middle-class family, and I was the second child, and my father worked in my mother's family's factory because he couldn't get a job. It was just about Depression time, and we had a fairly good life. My brother went to Hebrew school run in Lithuania, and
How much
I think-
older was he than you?
What?
How much older was your brother?
3 years.
3 years older.
And I think did kindergarten there, but I don't have much of a memory there. And
What do you remember about Kaunas itself? Do you remember much?
yes, I remember there was a very nice avenue with trees, and that was like the main part of the nicest part. I remember horses' hoofs early in the morning. We had cobblestones, and everything was horses. There were some cars already, but it was mostly horses and sleighs in the winter.
So your family lived in the city?
In the city, we had an apartment. There was a little garden in the back. And
your mother was at home with you?
yes, she was at home, but we also had a nursemaid. She wasn't that much at home, really. But she never worked.
What kind of religious affiliation did you have? What was the Jewish community like?
I don't think my family was too affiliated. I remember we had a seders, but I don't remember going to the shul or anything like. Maybe my father went, but I don't remember me going. And
You don't remember going?
I don't remember going
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Were you aware of any kind of anti-Semitism, or your parents talking about anti-Semitism?
Yes, well, the kids on the street used to call me Żyd, which is Jew in I guess Polish or Lithuanian.
And was it a derogatory?
Yes, it was, definitely.
So you were aware of that?
Oh, yes,
From
earliest on. Yeah.
And what was your impression of, you were 6 when the war started. Do you remember, your impressions of your parents talking about it, a sense of things happening?
They were talking about going to Palestine, and I wish they did. And I've talked to my brother about it, and they said by the time they were thinking of going, it was kind of too late. They couldn't get visas. I have two cousins in South Africa, and their parents left earlier. South Africa. South Africa has a big Jewish Lithuanian group living there. So.
What about your extended family? Were they in Kaunas also?
Yes. Oh, as far as I know, my mother's side family was all there.
And who was that?
Well, my uncle has 2 children who were also hidden with me. And my another uncle had 2 daughters, and one escaped into Russia with her husband, and one went into concentration camp. And trying to think, some of the my mother's brothers and sisters didn't have children yet. Some of them. I'm trying to think. I'm drawing a blank. But one couple went to Israel, right? And they
Sounds
had
like
two
a big
children.
family.
Yeah, my grandmother had 8 children by 2 husbands, and
That was your mother's mother.
my mother's mother, right?
And what happened to her?
She went into concentration camp, and the story goes that the Germans asked her, "Can you work?" And she said, "Yes, but not for you," and they killed her. But I'm not sure that's the true story. But she was very strong. She was one of the first, I wouldn't say vegetarians, but a real nature person. She walked naked in the snow, and she took long walks, and she kind of washed herself with snow, and she ate very little meat, or no meat at all. Just she followed all kinds of, and she was a very healthy person. I think she was much healthier than my mother. My mother didn't survive concentration camp. I think she could have survived had she been younger, maybe. Because she was a much stronger person.
Your father's family?
My father's family was in Latvia, near Riga, a little town named Dvinsk. And they had a leather factory, leather tanning factory. And the grandfather was already died before the war, but my grandmother kind of disappeared when the Germans came in.
So you don't know what happened to her?
I'm not quite sure. I kept asking my cousin, and I don't remember exactly. It wasn't that. I don't think he really knew either, because he was a young boy.
So you had more contact on kind of a daily basis with your mother's family. But when the war started, I mean, do you remember what your family knew about your father's family, or I mean, was there an effort to keep in touch with him?
My father was sending money to his mother, but once the Germans came in, it kind of stopped. He hasn't heard from her, so we assumed she was much older too. We assumed she died one way or another.
What do you remember of going to school as a child? You said kindergarten.
I went to kindergarten. I don't remember very much at all. It's surprising. I thought I would, but I don't. I was also quite sick a lot. I had diphtheria, and I had various other illnesses. It seemed like I remember being in bed a lot. So.
But you mentioned before that your brother went to a Hebrew school.
Yes.
Now, was that an after-school Hebrew
No,
school? Was it a yeshiva type of?
No, it was a modern Hebrew school. They called it a Riel, I think, something like that. Gymnasium. And everything was taught in Hebrew. And
but you did, was it just for boys, or?
No, it was
also for
education.
But you were not old enough to go.
No, I wasn't. I think I might have been there in kindergarten, but I don't have too good a memory.
So, what happened after the war started?
Well, the Russians came in 1940, and they were rounding up the rich people, the bourgeois, and one of my uncles was sent to Siberia. He died there. And apparently we were on the list. I understand we were all on the list to be sent to Siberia. But the Germans came in the meantime. And first we were not allowed to walk on the sidewalk. And then we had to wear the stars. And then we had to stand in 2 lines. I remember standing in line for candy and never getting any, because there were 2 sets of lines.
You mean one for Jews and
one for non-Jews. And the non-Jews line never moved.
So you, let's see, that was in 1941, right?
41, and then by summer of 1941, we were all rounded up and sent into Slobodka, which is a little town outside of Kaunas. And they made the people who lived there move out, which was really not fair, because it was their home. And we had a dog that didn't go with this man, and because we were hungry, we wouldn't feed our dog, and it was very sad. He was so hungry, and he wouldn't go with the owner.
Mm.
So we just took over a whole town, and they put barbed wire, electric wire.
So that became the ghetto.
The ghetto. And there was
Slobodka.
another ghetto, like across a highway, I understand, a smaller ghetto, but they liquidated soon after. They either killed some of the people and put some in the bigger ghetto.
So when you were moved into Slobodka, do you remember that, the process of moving, and do you remember what you took with you, how long?
I remember going on a cart.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't take too much furniture because the whole family moved into one room.
And that, by whole family, you mean you, your mother?
My mother, yeah.
And
In one room. And then my grandmother lived in another room, and my aunt, the one who saved us, lived with her sister in another room. There was a little house.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the basement, they dug a hiding place. And so when there were people being rounded up, we either went up into the attic or down into the cellar.
So do you remember how many people were living in the house altogether?
Well, we were 4, and
So your father was with you?
Yes.
And your brother? And
yeah,
your
we
mother.
were 6, but 7 people in that house.
Mm-hmm. So
Which wasn't too crowded,
wasn't too
really.
crowded, yeah.
I mean, by other standards.
Mm-hmm. And what did you do during the day? And
I ran wild. My mother was sent to work on the airport, I think laying asphalt. Then later she worked in a factory in Dilausen, which means the German uniforms used to come in full of lice and other things, and they went through a certain process of killing the lice and I guess cleaning them so they could go back to be used again. And my father worked in the organization of the ghetto. They had like a little government going on.
Was this the Judenrat of the ghetto?
I don't know what it's called, but that sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of had...
So it's part of like the Jewish administration
right,
of the ghetto.
Right. Of course, the Germans had to say, but
Mm-hmm.
they kind of... We're not sure what he was doing there, but he was part of it. And I was just running wild.
Did you, there must have been other kids in the same...
Oh yes, my cousins lived next to us.
Uh-huh.
They lived in one little room too. And
so there was no kind of organized school or anything like that for the children?
My father taught me how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned Russian. I spoke Russian as a child.
Oh, your family didn't speak Yiddish at home?
No. We spoke Russian. I learned Yiddish in the ghetto.
In Slobodka?
Yeah. I think it's called Slobodka. I better look it up.
No, I think, yeah, that's great.
Yes, I learned because so many kids were there.
So, in addition to people from Kaunas, were Jews from other areas brought into Slobodka?
I assume so. I don't really know, but I think Leah was outside of Kaunas.
Yeah.
So she wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. What about your brother? What was he doing? Was he old enough to work?
One summer he worked. They had some garden going on, and he brought some vegetables for us. But he did mostly reading. Mm-hmm. He went around looking for books. When people were taken out and deported, he used to go and get their books. Because the apartments were like open.
Mm. Do you remember the deportations?
I remember that we were spending a whole day in line, and the Germans separated us one side to another. And since my father worked for the organization, we had some papers, and so we were not sent at that time to be exterminated. But
how many times do you remember that happening?
I remember that once, and then another time I remember hiding in the attic and hearing people yelling and screaming, running around. But otherwise, I spent about a year and a half in the ghetto. The worst part was after I left.
After you left the ghetto?
Right, it was much worse.
Before we get to that, I just want to ask you if you remember what you did for food in the ghetto. And
My mother used to go out and barter with the peasants. She spoke Polish and Russian.
so was this when she went out to work?
Yes, she used to go take things and sell it. And there was one time we cut up linen, and my mother printed some designs on it for the babushkas, made babushkas. And then the peasants got mad at her because when they washed them, the color went out. It wasn't. I guess she didn't know how to dye things, but she's all the jewelry was taken away from us.
When was that?
The Germans came in house to house.
Oh, at the very beginning.
Very beginning, took all the jewelry away. But she managed to hide some jewelry in her corset. So, and then all the family did. And they would use that to barter for food and clothing or whatever else they had.
So did you have a feeling that you were starving, or did you?
We were hungry, but my mother, like before she went to work, she made a plate full of sandwiches for me and my brother. I remember that part. So we weren't starving. We ate potatoes a lot.
That she would bring from the outside?
Yeah. And I don't know whether the Germans gave us food or not. I don't remember but come to think of it, I don't remember. I'll have to ask my brother.
You don't remember stores in the ghetto or bread?
No.
Getting bread or anything?
I remember going for bread to a bakery and picking up a loaf of bread. But I don't know if it was an official bakery or somebody was just baking. We were buying it from them.
Now, you said your aunt and your cousins were also living in the same house with you?
My cousins lived like a house away. And my uncle and his wife and wife's mother lived in, and the two children.
And were your aunt and uncle also working? Do you
I think she didn't go out, but I think he went out and worked.
So, roughly how long did this go on for that you were?
Well, we got in 41, and I think end of 42, beginning of 43, this came down through the rumors that they were taking the kids out and killing them, so that we have to save the kids. So my aunt's husband who died, who committed suicide before the war, because they got him to dig his own grave, and even though he got a reprieve, he just didn't feel like he could live with that. So, but he was very friendly with a lot of Lithuanian people.
Your uncle had been?
Yes.
Yeah.
So through the contacts, my aunt contacted a man named Kazakaitis, who was head of the children's homes, and he arranged to put us into different children's homes.
Let's stop there. Okay.
1 second.